We're having a little election in the United States, and I'm happy not to talk about it anymore, but we can. But I must say a lot of Americans, I think, have lost some faith in our democracy. It's looking very polarized, as it often does in the days before a big election. People say the future and livelihood of the country are at stake, which actually they do say before every election. But in fact, it is a very consequential election, and I must say I think we could use a dose of Indian optimism and ebullience about the future of our democracy in the same way that I think we feel very excited about the future of yours. I'd like to say I think the US-India partnership will really be one of the drivers of peace and prosperity in the 21st century. A lot of people in your country and in mine are still getting their hands around this reality because, of course, we've had a very complicated relationship in the past. We now have a very new one. I mean, just like India has shifted, I think, out of non-alignment and towards alliances for prosperity, as Mr. Akbar said. Just as Prime Minister Modi has signaled a big and ambitious new look in Indian foreign policy, so our system, I think for the last 15 or so years, has taken a big new look at the US-India partnership and thought increasingly ambitiously about what we can do together, not just to help each other develop and grow, but what we can do together in the world, and not just in South Asia, but in East Asia, in the Indian Ocean, further afield in global governance. So I think this partnership will actually be a central driver of prosperity and peace for both of our countries. And in fact, I would say we have a greater symmetry of interests, in fact, than perhaps any other two big countries, right? We both seek balance in Asia. We both seek to defeat terrorists. I think in not very subtle ways, we are convinced that violent extremism is the great challenge of our age, and we are not ambiguous about the need to confront it. We both believe in maintaining open, plural societies and fostering not just tolerant societies, but a tolerant world, I think more than many other great powers. We both have a compelling interest in juicing global growth. This, of course, is hugely important to India, as you've emerged as the world's fastest growing big economy. It's hugely important to us. I mean, one thing that's driving our politics is the fact that Americans don't feel as prosperous as they did. It's not because of American decline, which I don't think is true. It's because people don't feel in their pocketbooks like we're winning, as Trump would say. And I think the US and India can help shape a global economic climate in which we both win again. If you were going to design two countries to compete in this world that we're looking out at, thinking ahead 10, 20, 30 years, if you were going to design two countries to do that, I think the two countries, in fact, would look a lot more like the United States and India than they look like China or Russia. Both of our societies are driven by innovation, entrepreneurial dynamism, huge pluralism, open societies, all the invigorating effects that you get out of an open society in terms of civic interaction with government and the genius of public opinion rather than simply elite opinion. The rich human capital that both of our countries possess. I mean, India, of course, at a greater scale than any other. These are the drivers of growth and innovation in a way that Russia's nuclear forces or China's very heavy infrastructure are not, right? And so thinking about this much more competitive world we are living in, I actually think the US and India are better positioned to thrive in it than are perhaps any other two big countries. And I think a lot of that has to do with how we interact, of course, between each other, how your human capital fits with our technology leadership, how your technology prowess thinks with our economic heft, how we can work together, not just in defense and security, but on issues of the environment, issues of energy, issues of health and education. This is an extraordinarily exciting time. Now, that said, I don't think India and the US can succeed as island fortresses. I mean, I think there's a huge domestic story here, which will obviously consume your energies for many decades. as you develop and grow and govern this enormous society. In the US, I mean, some of these Trump voters, frankly, quite like the idea of building walls, creating a much more secure America that maybe stays home and doesn't worry so much about the rest of the world. But in fact, India and the US have a very compelling stake in sustaining and strengthening this liberal world order, because we need an enabling environment. We need a world that is safe for democracy and safe for our interests. And the great threats to those foundations don't come from within our societies, they come from outside them. They come from military revanchism in China and Russia. They come from terrorist sponsorship in Pakistan and parts of the Middle East. They come from the chaos we've seen in places like Syria as order has collapsed. And so I would argue that although the domestic story here is so important, you, like we, cannot succeed without a more enabling environment abroad. And I think as India's power and ambitions grow, your people will discover, as ours did, by hook or by crook in the 20th century, that we have to go out, that staying home is not enough. And I think the scope for US-India collaboration in Asia and also in the Middle East is quite big and quite exciting. But I think we do have to explain this to our publics. So our power, our values, and our people's aspirations are reinforced by a much more open and pluralistic world. They are undercut, these values and interests are undercut by a more disorderly, great power balance of power world, right? So we both have a stake in what's happening in the South China Sea. We both have a stake in what's happening in the Middle East. We both have a stake in the global rules. Right? India has so much catch-up growth that it's now in position to achieve. You don't want to have the wind in your face as you catch up and grow and take off as a result of a contraction of global trade or a spike in international conflict. You want an enabling environment to grow. You can create that enabling environment to grow at home, but we need to also create it abroad. That's why I think we need to work more closely together across this whole range of fields. I'll close just with the thought that some people see China as the great pace setter of this new era we live in. Some look out and see this chaos, this disorderly world, and think that this greater anarchy is the new normal. I think the US and India can be the pace setters of the 21st century. I think most people in the world want the kind of institutions and values that our countries enjoy, that our people enjoy. Most people in the world want to live in freedom, in security, bound by rules and institutions at home. They don't want to live under strong men. We've seen that again and again in the Arab Spring. We've seen it in China with the great pushback against this centralized leadership. We see it in Hong Kong, we see it in Tibet, we see it in Xinjiang, we see it among the Chinese elites. Most people want to be free. Most people want to live in open societies. Most people, I think, still want to live in this rule-bound world that has been mixed, but that has produced more prosperity and security than any other kind of order people have come up with. And I think the US and India can drive that. So I look ahead, and I'm quite optimistic because I see an Indo-American century and not a Chinese one. Thank you.